You're watching Reality Check. The controversy over Pegasus has escalated with a fresh set of names supposedly marked for targeting by the spyware reported by a consortium of media organizations. Rahul Gandhi, Prashant Kishore, Mamata Banerjee's nephew Abhishek Banerjee, a former election commissioner Ashok Lavasa who challenged the Prime Minister's campaign in the 2019 polls, two union ministers amongst the latest set of names, only sharpening the attack on the government that it was snooping on its rivals. The government has hit back with a series of aggressive denials, attempting to distance themselves from the Pegasus scandal. But do these denials add up? Remember, the government's denials, or rather non-denials, date back to 2019, when the first reports emerged of the use of Pegasus to target Indian citizens. From then to now, the government has not emphatically or categorically denied using Pegasus. Instead, these are some of the things they've been saying. November 2019, the then IT Minister Ravi Shankar Prasad does not directly deny using Pegasus, says no unauthorized interception has been done. Any violation of procedure is actionable in law. Again, in the same month, G. Kishan Reddy, then Minister of State Home Affairs, ducks the question on the use of Pegasus, says the IT Act empowers the government to monitor, decrypt information. In July of this year, an IT ministry official does not directly deny using Pegasus in response to the latest story that's come out. The allegations regarding government surveillance on specific people has no basis, he said. Earlier reports on Pegasus had no factual basis. It's been categorically denied by all parties, including WhatsApp, who were part of the 2019 breach. Again, today, Ashwini Vaishnav, the IT minister, again did not directly deny the use of Pegasus. He said earlier reports on Pegasus had no factual basis, categorically denied by all parties, including WhatsApp. NSO Group, the parent company of Pegasus, has rubbished claims on the reports, the media reports, and also he said that India has well-established protocols for surveillance. Again today, Ravi Shankar Prasad, former IT minister, who was rolled out as part of the government's defense, did not directly deny the use of Pegasus. In fact, he said if over 45 countries are using Pegasus, why is only India being targeted? And also that there's a robust legal framework in India. Now, why these governments' denials don't add up is because, number one, the NSO Group, the parent company of Pegasus, continues to maintain it only sells the spyware to governments. NSO has not named these government clients. Neither the NSO Group nor India has categorically stated that the Indian government is not a client. Some phones of Indian targets were found to be infected with Pegasus according to these media reports. And so if India, the Indian government, is not a Pegasus client, who's targeting these phones? Why is the Indian government accepting the claims of a private agency, NSO, in rubbishing the Pegasus project story? Why is India shying away from probing the Pegasus project? Now, all of this, remember, is despite red flags being raised by Pegasus back in 2019, to which the government doesn't appear to have acted. Despite WhatsApp in that year reporting a Pegasus attack, there was no action by the government. In 2019, just to remind our viewers, the government's cyber watchdog, CERT.in, flagged a potential threat to WhatsApp. WhatsApp reported back that it had experienced a Pegasus-like attack, and says that they subsequently fixed the loophole. They said that around 121 Indian users may have been impacted by this Pegasus attack. The cyber watchdog, CERT.in, instead ended up issuing a notice to WhatsApp and not the NSO Group. Why did the government not use that as an opportunity to probe the NSO Group from 2019 all the way to now? All right, joining me tonight on Reality Check, I have with me Shashi Tharoor, Senior Congress Leader, also a Chair of the Standing Parliamentary Committee on IT. Thank you very much indeed, Shashi Tharoor, for joining us. You wrote a piece in which you, somewhat generously, if I may say so, seem to have given the government an out, where you said if the Modi government isn't snooping on us, who else unleashed Pegasus? An argument which your own party, Mr. Tharoor, is not making. They see this very much as the government snooping on its political rivals and citizens.
I think there's a very, very reasonable assumption that many people, including my party colleagues, have made. I'm just taking the government at its word when the IT minister stands up in Parliament and says that, we haven't done it. Then it would be difficult for me as chairman of the parliamentary committee to say that I give no value to that denial.
Okay.
But that denial cannot be grounds for brushing the issue under the carpet.
Okay.
Because clearly, when you have a software that has found itself on the phones of Indian victims, when that software is apparently only sold, that spyware is only sold to vetted governments in the language of the seller, then if our government didn't do it, some other government must have done it. And that, for me, is an equally important national security issue that warrants investigation.
But
so my argument is that either way, whether our government did it or some other government did it, it must be investigated. That's the thrust of my statement.
Okay, but let me just ask you, or rather challenge you on your primary premise that the government has said we haven't done it. We were just scrolling through the government's chronology, as the Home Minister said, "Aap chronology samajhe," the chronology of the government's denials or non-denials. At no point, Mr. Tharoor, have they categorically come out and said that we have not purchased or deployed Pegasus.
Correct, they haven't said that. What they've said is there has been no unauthorized surveillance. The interesting thing about that, however, is that it is difficult for there to be authorized surveillance using Pegasus. Because you see, the laws are very clear in our country. We have the Telegraph Act of 1885 governing telecommunications and the IT Act of 2000 that governs IT, technology and the transmission of electronic information, and so on. Now, hacking is a criminal offense under the Information Technology Act. If you look at Section 43, read with Section 66, it says that unauthorized access to a computer device, computer resource, computer network can attract imprisonment up to 3 years or a fine that may extend up to 5 lakh rupees or more. So that's pretty serious. Now, how can you authorize? Very clearly, the language has been not only laid out in the Act but affirmed in a Supreme Court judgment in 1996, which is you can authorize only interception of telephone communications and data in the interests of the sovereignty and integrity of India, the security of the state, friendly relations with other countries, or preventing crimes, the incitement or commission of an offense. Now, all of these are very clearly in the law. Under which category does reading Prashant Kishore's or Rahul Gandhi's mobile phones fall?
Well, while that may be the case, that under the law you can't hack, as several cyber experts, and you also refer to this in your article, point out that you can find exceptions, right? If you say that there's a national security exception, you may be able to legally justify hacking.
So the question is, once you've identified who the victims are, and forensic analysis has established that this particular virus, the Pegasus spyware, has been put on their phone, then the question comes up, in that case, what is the national security ground in the case of this particular individual? Now, it'll be very difficult, it seems to me, for anyone to find national security grounds for putting a virus in the phone or a spyware in the phone of the leader of the principal opposition party, of a political consultant strategist, of many journalists. How can journalists lawfully going about practicing their profession be a national security threat? And so without those reasons, it's extremely difficult to justify grounds for authorizing surveillance.
Of course. But Mr. Tharoor, as we well know, and while your sort of belief in the government's words is somewhat, I would say touching almost, if not optimistic, we know how laws and systems in this country are repeatedly bypassed and rule books either thrown out of the window or distorted. So what makes you think it's any different in this case?
Well, the fact is that if it turns out that that's exactly what's happened, as to use a famous phrase of one of your former colleagues, the nation needs to know. And the nation needs to know so it can draw its own conclusions from it. Also, for a minister to stand up in Parliament and mislead Parliament would be considered a violation of every parliamentary convention. That's why I would prefer to believe that he means what he says. He says there has been no unauthorized interception. So there are only two possible explanations. There's either been an authorized interception or there has been an interception by a foreign government. Both need to be looked into If there was an authorized interception, we need to know on what grounds, because the grounds are
But
specified
right.
in the law.
But the very fact, I'll wrap here because I know we're short on time, but very briefly, just the very fact that the government has expressed no interest in doing that. In fact, they seem to be taking at face value denials put out by the NSO group, which is itself, in a sense, in the dock. Doesn't that raise any red flags to you at all?
It does, because the NSO denials are actually merely of the total list, saying that the mere fact of certain numbers being on a list doesn't mean that those were hacked. Absolutely true. But the NSO doesn't know what was done. So what you can do, and what indeed these investigations so far have done, is to actually look at the numbers, link them to names of individuals, have those individuals notified, and see whether their phones have been compromised. And in the case of India, I gather 10 phones have been, 7 of which iPhones actually were found to have the Pegasus virus on it. So it's too much of a coincidence that they're on this database, which supposedly is not incriminating by itself, but that those numbers then lead to evidence of criminal activity that is hacking on other phones. So that's precisely why that isn't a good enough answer.
All right, Shashi Tharoor, thank you very much indeed for joining me tonight. Let's go straight across to Derek O'Brien, another senior opposition leader of the Trinamool Congress. As we've seen, senior leaders of the Trinamool Congress, including Abhishek Banerjee, are also on the list. Derek O'Brien, do you share somewhat of the similar sort of Shashi Tharoor's benefit of doubt argument in favor of the government, or are you clear that this is in fact the Modi government snooping on its political rivals despite its denials?
I didn't hear all of what Mr. Tharoor said, but this is the Gujarat model of 2002 now being rolled out at the National Lodge by Mr. Modi and Mr. Shah. So this issue is very serious, but there's a lighter side to the issue, so we don't need to. There is a lighter side, Mr. James, so if you allow me, you know, they snooped on Mr. Abhishek Banerjee's phone. We're told on the political strategist's phone, Mr. Abhishek Banerjee is obviously the key, the one general secretary. But after, there's a lighter side to this. Now, after snooping on his phone, after listening to all the conversations, after letting loose all the government agencies, CBI, ED, after outspending the Trinamool Congress by 100 times, after giving dictation to the Election Commission, after making all your own rules, you still go and lose the election. You get thrashed by Trinamool in the election. So I think there's a light.
So you're saying all that snooping, if there was snooping, didn't help. But on a serious note, Derek O'Brien, the fact that if they were indeed snooping on Abhishek Banerjee and also Prashant Kishore, who was, these were the two close associates in a sense of Mamta Banerjee during the West Bengal campaign. Does that not concern you that it's quite possible if two close aides of Mamta Banerjee were being snooped on? I mean, in a sense, that means she herself was under a form of indirect surveillance.
Of course. Please understand how desperate Modi and Shah were, how desperate they were to defeat Mamta Banerjee, the Trinamool Congress, and Abhishek Banerjee and everyone in Bengal. They were desperate. They were desperate. And that's why, as I said, I didn't want to sound facetious but in the beginning, but that's why we're taking this issue very seriously. And now Parliament is in session.
Right.
There are lots of issues in Parliament which we are taking up. Which price rise, which would be the farmer bill. These are all key issues, which would be federalism, which would be MP-led funds, which would be the state of the economy. But tomorrow, at the crack of dawn, like today we went on 10 MPs, went on cycles to Parliament to price rise the LPG. Tomorrow we are taking this up both inside Parliament and outside Parliament.
But Derek O'Brien, when the government, you're taking it up, but today, and this is the point that Shashi Tharoor was making, if the IT minister has said, they may not have directly said we didn't deploy Pegasus or we didn't buy Pegasus, but if the IT minister is saying we didn't do anything illegal, and hacking is illegal, ergo the assumption that we have not deployed Pegasus.
I mean, you all heard what the new IT minister, poor fellow, he himself was being snooped on. What was Pegasus, how do I pronounce it again? Pegasus. So what was it then? It was either a video game, Was it a video game? Or
No.
Mr. Amit Shah must be liking these,
No, the IT minister is saying we haven't done anything illegal. Hacking is illegal, ergo we didn't use Pegasus.
There's a key issue here, Mr. Jain. This is government. Government has. This is not somebody like you or I going and buying some spyware. This is government. This is government. So the government has done it. So the truth of the matter is this is the worst kept secret. Everybody knew the style of the former Chief Minister of Gujarat and the former Home Minister of Gujarat.
Right.
They've just used a state model and they've tried to do a national launch of the state model.
Right.
This is nothing. We just come off a Bengal election 3-4 months. They waited in the campaign. There are no rules.
Okay.
They want to break every institution in India. They don't care about parliament. They don't care about any other institution. The CBI and the agencies are in their back pocket. So this is something else. And I think this is not only, again, we'll go back to the old story that this is all anti-national.
Right. Okay.
We're taking it up in parliament tomorrow, outside parliament tomorrow.
Okay.
The Trinamool Congress, the second largest opposition party, we will be protesting. The political strategist who we hired, his phone was hacked. And we have only one All India General Secretary, Mr. Abhishek Banerjee.
Okay.
His phone was hacked. So, Mr. Jain, thank you. I must congratulate you. I'm not being condescending. But what has happened to the other? What has happened to your brothers and sisters from the other from the neighborhood in Noida? This subject is not important.
Well, I haven't really been following what they've been up to, but I'm sure you have. So, but we leave it at that. Thank you so much, Derek O'Brien, for joining us tonight on the show. Okay, let's go across now to panel. Deshratan Nigam is with us, the political analyst, supports the BJP/RSS. Mishi Chaudhary is with us, technology lawyer, founder of SFLC.in, is looking at issues of internet and digital privacy. Deshratan Nigam, let me just start with you, that putting aside whether or not the government's denials add up, the curious thing here, Deshratan Nigam, is that if there is even the slightest sense or information that the phones or devices of Indian nationals have been targeted by a foreign spyware agency, shouldn't that be setting off red flags to the government to say, look, if it's not us, find out who it is, investigate? Why take the denials put out by this company, this Israeli company, at face value and rubbish the entire story?
Vasu, one has to be very clear that you are presuming that this story is correct. And their entire premises, in fact, of Derek O'Brien or Mr. Shashi Tharoor is based on that premise. And the edifice is being built on that.
No. In fact, by the way, just to be clear, I am nobody to say whether the story is correct or not. And in fact, Shashi Tharoor, interestingly, though he's Congress, is also taking a nuanced position. He's saying, and I agree with him on this point, investigate. Who better than the government investigate and find out, is it true or is it false? Why completely rubbish it?
Let me answer that. The people who are saying that their phone is hacked, have they filed any complaint anywhere? If my phone was hacked and I knew it, I would immediately go to the police and lodge a complaint. None of that is being done. Why? That raises the first suspicion. Secondly, let me point out, if you read NSO's answer, and you have not said those parts in your program, they clearly say this information which is being paraded now is uncorroborated. Not at all, there is no documentation proof, and this is easily available and accessible on various platforms such as HLR lockup.
Deshratan Nigam.
Vasu, don't interrupt. Please.
No, I'm not interrupting. I'm saying.
Let me build up my point.
Again, my question is, like the government, why do you have such touching faith in the denials of a foreign spyware? This is their job to sell spyware. Why on earth would you believe them or take them at face value?
I was coming to that. You interrupted me. You know, what they are talking about is the factual information. That this information is easily accessible on a platform like HLR lockup services. Such services are openly available to anyone, where and any time.
Yes.
Right. And secondly,
I'm aware of their statement. Answer the question. Why would you believe their statement?
It is not about believing. This is a factual statement, easily verifiable by me and you as well. Probably if you had looked.
No, Deshratna Nigam. Hold on a second. Number one, NSO Group continues to maintain that it sells only to government.
Forget about NSO. Forget about NSO.
You just said it NSO.
No.
Now you're saying forget about it.
Now, why I am saying so? Why I am saying so?
NSO says we only supply to governments. NSO doesn't disclose its clients. So we don't know whether the Indian government is a client or not. NSO also says, by the way, we don't know how our clients use our service. At times they say we do, at times they say we. There are enough red flags here for any right-thinking government that doesn't have a guilty conscience to say we must investigate. Anyway,
let
me move on. I'll come back to you. Let me move on to Mishi Chaudhary. Let her respond. Mishi Chaudhary, from everything that you've heard and seen so far of the story, do you think that the government has a clear conscience?
I'm going to lay out a few points here. India does not have any parliamentary or judicial oversight on any kind of surveillance that executive carries out. We are a democratic country. Our executive surveillance mechanism is like me checking my own examination paper. You issue surveillance orders, and then only the cabinet secretaries can sit to review what was actually ordered. That's the first thing. Mr. Manish Tiwari, a minister who was in the UPA government, once did bring a private member's bill on surveillance reform, and nothing happened so far.
Okay.
Second thing Mr. Tharoor said, he's the chairman of the IT Standing Committee. This is not the first time we have heard about this. The Pegasus WhatsApp scandal. Citizens Lab issued a report called Predator in Your Pocket in November of 2019. We wrote a letter that time as SFLC.in to Mr. Tharoor saying that the committee should actually look into this.
Right.
Get a clarification from the Indian government. Have consultations on judicial reforms.
Sure.
Nothing was done. The third thing I'm going to say is that the text of the statement by the current government and the minister, I've read this.
Yes, Ashwini Vaishnav.
What they've said is, what they've actually said is that each case of interception, monitoring and decryption is approved by the competent authority. That is the Union Home Secretary.
Yeah.
And there's an established oversight mechanism. I already addressed the fact that the oversight is done by the executive on its own.
Right.
They haven't denied about Pegasus at all. And when they say that this is done legally, which means that the assertion is that the grounds which are available in the Telegraph Act or the Section 69 of Information Technology Act, none of those grounds has to be applicable. None of that is applicable. So all of this, from my point of view, is a ton of red herring. And we don't have a clear answer of the fact whether the government has deployed Pegasus or not. And second, the parliamentarians themselves are not discussing the fact that where is the independent oversight?
Okay, that's the right. That's the
not deny this food NSO in California.
That's the wider question of the infirmities in our privacy architecture. But Deshratna Nigam, coming back to it again, as I said, leave aside, because listen, sitting here, none of us know. You and I would not want to take anybody at face value, right? Either the media reports which cite an Amnesty forensic analysis which says some smartphones were infected with Pegasus, or the NSO group's denials. Let's say we don't want to believe either of it. Come back to the basic question: why does the government keep trying to rubbish the entire story, stonewall any kind of investigation that only leads to the suspicion that the government's hands are not clean?
Vasu, for any investigation to begin, there has to be some level of evidence. You can't do it in the air. Where is the evidence? Please show me documented evidence or otherwise. You can't be investigating hearsay. You can't be investigating something which is easily available.
Ravi Shankar Prasad, a case of sedition was filed from a bunch of people ranging from Greta Thunberg to an activist in Bangalore on the basis of a tweeted document.
Don't mix up the issue.
I'm not mixing up the issue at all. I'm saying you and I well know that governments can act.
There is forensic examination report.
Governments can act on much flimsier evidence than in this case. They have acted on literally on tweets.
Let me answer your question. This is something, the information is easily accessible in public domain and easily available. So there is nothing,
What is easily available?
No.
NSO has clearly pointed out this. And you can, me and you can do some due diligence also on that.
I see. Okay, so we now are left to probe allegations of the deployment of foreign spyware between you and me. My friend, I'm very flattered with the faith you have in our investigative abilities. But
that
anyway,
is what investigative journalism is all about.
Okay, all right. Actually,
16 agencies, 16 media
News
agencies are
organizations.
involved. Amnesty
No.
International has
That
put out a forensic
how
report.
stories
All
are
of that
planted.
is
So
hearsay.
don't tell.
So what happened in 2019 when WhatsApp went and sued NSO? What did the government of India actually do other than just issuing one statement to them? What was the result of that investigation?
Actually, that could have been itself.
You should have implemented Government of India, filed an application and implemented Government
there is a
of India.
petition in the Delhi High Court by the Center for Public Interest Litigation
Okay.
and Public
So what
Freedom
All
of
right.
India.
Okay. What happened to
What
that
happened?
petition?
There is a
Desata
pending
Nigam, you're a
petition.
lawyer.
What
You know
happened?
very well what
So,
could have happened to that petition.
There is a petition happening
Oh,
right
okay,
now.
okay,
and
we leave
it's
it.
pending in the court.
We leave it there.
Trust the judiciary. You don't.
We
trust
leave
the-
it there. Mishi, Desata Nigam, I'm completely out of time. This debate is not going away anywhere in a hurry, whether the government likes it or not. But thank you all so much for watching Reality Check and joining us on the show. Good night.